Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Indian laws on abortions. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. Why are we discussing about Indian abortion laws? That is because we recently had the Supreme Court of United States of America which overturned the landmark Roe vs. Wade judgment of 1973. What is this Roe vs. Wade judgment? Why did the Supreme Court of United States of America overturn it? Has been discussed recently on our big news initiative. So please do look into it. Our today's discussion will only focus on Indian abortion laws. We will try and understand what are the laws in India, what are the different provisions and what are the controversies surrounding the recent amendments. When we look into the Indian abortion laws, back in the 1960s, in the wake of high number of induced abortions taking place, the Union government ordered the Constitution of Shanti Lal Shah Committee to deliberate on the legislation of abortion in the country. What was happening in 1960? We live in a patriarchal society. In this patriarchal society, there were large-scale abortions that were taking in the underground process. Large number of women started losing their lives as well, and because of the preference for the males, they had to abort the female fetuses as well. In order to overcome this particular issue, because there was existing social and cultural differences back in India, the Indian government decided that we have to overcome all these issues. We have to regulate the abortion practices in India, and which is why it appointed one of the committees called as Shantilal Committee. The Shantilal Committee carried out a comprehensive review of the social, cultural, legal as well as the medical aspects of the abortion. So this committee recommended that we have to legalize abortion as it is more to do with the taking care of the health of the women and about the lives of the fetus as well. So on the medical grounds, on the basis of the life of the women, they came up with what is called as the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, which ultimately was implemented in 1971. Because of the issues that we had in the 1960s, they came up with a law to address all these issues, which is why the government came up with this law called as the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1971. Do note, this law is an exception to the Indian Penal Code provisions of 312 and 313 and sets out the rules of how and when a medical abortion can be carried out. What is the section 312 and 313 of the Indian Penal Code? It speaks about miscarriage. One is with consent, the other is without consent. When we look into section 312, it speaks about causing miscarriage. What is this miscarriage? Miscarriage basically means abortion. Miscarriage basically means premature expulsion of the child or the fetus from the mother's womb before the completion of a natural gestation period. So under section 312, it speaks with reference to the consent of the women. Under 313, where causing miscarriage happens without the consent of the women. Let's see what this section says. Whoever voluntarily causes a woman with child to miscarry shall, if such miscarriage be not caused in good faith for the purpose of saving the life of the woman, be punished with the imprisonment of either description for a term which extends to 3 years or with fine or with both. If the woman be quick with child, shall be punished with imprisonment for either description for a term which may extend to 7 years and shall also be liable to fine. And the explanation also says a woman who causes herself to miscarry is within the meaning of this section. What does this mean? As we just discussed, miscarriage is about abortion. What is this quick with child as mentioned under this section? This basically means that you have the fetus which is present in the mother's womb. The fetus starts moving. There is the movement within the mother's womb which is called as quick with child. This section can be categorized into two parts. One, where there is quickening, where there is not quickening. When there is no quickening, it means there is no drastic movement of the fetus. In that particular case, if a person engages in the miscarriage with the consent of the woman, that person can be penalized and this imprisonment can go up to 3 years. And when there is quickening, that is quick with child, when there is movement of the fetus, even with the consent of the woman, if miscarriage happens, in that case, this person can be imprisoned for about 7 years. So under section 300 312, what we have is the consent of the women which is taken into picture. In section 313, what we have is causing miscarriage without the women's consent. So here the miscarriage happens. It can be done by any of the family members. It can be done by any person. In spite, it can be done even by the doctors as well. If it is happening without the women's consent, then that person who engages in such activity will be imprisoned for a period as much as 10 years as well. An exception to this is what we have in the form of medical termination of the Pregnancy Act. Ideally, terminating the fetus, aborting the fetus is not right according to the Indian Penal Code. An exception to this is the medical termination of the Pregnancy Act. What would happen? Ideally, if a person engages in miscarriage or in the abortion, what you will immediately have is the Indian Penal Code. The Indian Penal Code steps in and it puts that particular person who is engaged in the activity for a period of imprisonment or with fine. But if a woman's life is under danger and for the purpose of saving the life of the woman, if the doctor engages in such an activity, he will not be imprisoned, and that is what is given under the medical termination of the Pregnancy Act. So what we have to look is with respect to the medical termination of the Pregnancy Act. It was initially published back in the year 1971. We have had multiple amendments as well, and the recent amendment that we have is with respect to the 2021. So according to it, it can broadly be categorized into three parts. What are those? One is up to 20 weeks, next is up to 20 to 24 weeks, and then the third is beyond 24 weeks. We will try and understand what are the conditions that is allowed under this particular law. So under this law, do note, it does not give absolute right to women to abortion. Abortion is permitted on medical opinion under certain circumstances to a specified time limit. What does the 2021 Act say? It says under the 2021 Act, medical termination of a pregnancy is permitted if it is backed by the medical opinion and is being sought for at least one of the following reasons. So abortion can take place if it falls under any of these three criteria. What are these three criteria? If the continuation of the pregnancy would involve a risk to the life of the pregnant woman. So if the doctors feel that this person, if she continues with the pregnancy, if she gives birth in the near future to the fetus, which will become a baby in the near future, the person's life who is giving birth to this baby will also come under a problem. She may lose the life as well. So in order to protect the women, in order to safeguard the rights of the women, in order to make sure that her life is intact, then this procedure can be taken up and abortion practices can be initiated. If its continuation would result in grave injury to the woman's physical or the mental health. What do we mean by women's physical and the mental health? When we speak about a person who's got pregnant because of the action of rape or because of an incest, in such a particular case, the women go through what is called as the mental health issues because it has happened not because of her own conviction but because of a rape or an incest. So because it is a rape, which is why she is going through an emotional trauma, and such can also be considered as well. Added to it, if there is unwanted pregnancy because of the failure of the contraception method, even that can be considered as injury to the mental health of the women and can also be allowed to be aborted as well. This is the second condition. In the case of a substantial risk, that if the child was born, it would suffer from serious physical and mental abnormality. We have a lot of technology of late where we would be able to understand while the child is in the womb whether it will be a proper birth or it will not be a proper birth. We would also be able to understand if the baby is out of the womb of the mother, will it have any repercussions to the baby as well. So we have the advanced technology. So if the pregnancy becomes successful, and in all likelihood if the child would suffer from complications and will also have future physical issues, in such case as well the baby or the fetus can be aborted. So this is where it can happen up to 20 weeks And when such pregnancy is being terminated, what we require is the recommendation from one single doctor. This is the first part. The second part is between 20 to 24 weeks. So this is a period where you would require the opinion of two registered medical practitioners. In the earlier case, where it is less than 20 weeks, what you require is the permission from one single registered medical practitioner. But if it is anywhere between 20 to 24 weeks, what you require is the permission from two medical practitioners. When can this happen? If a woman is either a survivor of sexual assault or rape or incest, this practice can be taken up. If the woman happens to be a minor, this 20 to 24 weeks practice can be taken up. If her marital status has changed during the ongoing pregnancy, either widowhood or divorce, that she has become pregnant, while she is pregnant, her husband has passed away, she has become a widow, or this has resulted in divorce as well. In such a case, the woman can also go through this particular practice of abortion if permission is given by the medical practitioners. If she has major physical disability or is mentally ill on the grounds of fetal malformation incompatible with life, or if the child is born, it would be seriously handicapped. That if the child is born, it can have its own share of complications. The child will have the physical issues as well. In that case, they can also abort between 20 to 24 weeks. If the women in humanitarian settings or disaster or emergency situations as declared by the government, again between 20 to 24 weeks, they have every right to abort, but this will require the permission or the opinion of two registered medical practitioners. Does it mean that after 24 weeks, women would not be able to use this abortion laws? No, she can still use as well. If she has to use beyond 24 weeks, it can only be done on the grounds of fetal abnormalities if a four-member medical board as set up in each state under the act give permission to do so. So even if it is beyond 24 weeks, she would be able to abort the fetus, but this will require the permission from a four-member medical board. This four-member medical board will be established in every state, and the state would be able to regulate it. So if these four members decide that it can harm the women as well as it can create fetal abnormalities, then abortion can take place even after 24 weeks. The law, notwithstanding any of the above conditions, also provides that where it is immediately necessary to save the life of the pregnant woman, abortion can be carried out at any time by a single registered medical practitioner. So in spite of all these laws that are existing, if a person may have a threat to her life, if she falls in danger that she herself can pass away, in that case the baby can be aborted and the life of the woman can be saved as well. These are some of the provisions with respect to Medical Termination Amendment Act of 2021. What does this act further speak about? It also speaks about the unmarried woman as well as the minor. When it comes to the unmarried woman, she can also have access to the abortion as well, and this is the major difference when you consider to the 1971 Act. When you consider the 1971 Act, there was a grey area, there have been legal contradictions as well, but when it comes to the 2021 amendment, it is clear that even unmarried women would be able to access abortion under the specified conditions as we just discussed. Added to it, the spousal consent, which is generally assumed to be important, is not important when it comes to the unmarried woman. However, if the woman is a minor, in that case, the guardian's consent may be required. This Act of 2021 further gives importance to the protection of privacy of the women. We have the important section in this Act called as Section 5A. This section clearly goes on to say that if there is a woman who's gone through this entire procedure of abortion, the doctor who engages in the operation should not reveal any information about this woman. So if the doctor engages in revealing the confidentiality or the secret of this particular woman, the doctor may be penalized with a punishment of about 1 year or with fine or with both as well. So the privacy of the person is also kept intact with this 2021 amendment. Now what we have to focus is with respect to what are the differences between the 1971 law as well as the 2021 amendment. When you look into the 1971 law, what we discussed here was up to 20 weeks in 2021. But when it comes to 1971, it was up until 12 weeks. So they did not have the provision of 20 weeks, but from 12 to 20 weeks, what they required is the advice of two medical practitioners under the 1971. But for the period from 12 to 20, what you require is the support of the single registered medical practitioner. For 12 to 20, the earlier law wanted two people to identify it, give permission to it, but in 2021, between 12 to 20, all you require is the permission from one single medical practitioner. When it comes to 20 to 24 weeks, this was not allowed under the 1971 Act, but this is allowed under the 2021 Act. But this means it will require the permission from two medical practitioners. Is there a provision with respect to more than 24 weeks? No. This provision is not available in the 1971 law, but this is applicable and available in the 2021 amendment. So do remember, when it comes to beyond 24 weeks, this will require the state level medical board to give the permission, but that was not existing in the 1971 Act. However, both the laws also had that if a medical practitioner feels that it is immediately necessary to save the life of the woman, they could abort the fetus in that particular case. These are some of the major differences between the 1971 as well as the 2021. What have been the judicial judgments? The Justice K.C. Puttaswamy versus the Union of India and others has said that the existing laws do not permit unconditional abortion in the country. In the landmark 2017 right to privacy judgment in the Justice Puttaswamy versus the Union of India and others, the Supreme Court also held in this judgment that addition of a pregnant woman on whether to continue a pregnancy or not is part of a person's right to privacy as well, and therefore the right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So whether to continue pregnancy or not is ultimately left to the women, and this is identified as part of right to privacy, and right to privacy is part of Article 21. So this is equivalent to Article 21. So a woman would be able to decide whether she has to continue the pregnancy or not. Calcutta High Court in February 2022 allowed a 37-year-old woman who was 34 weeks into pregnancy to get a medical abortion as the fetus was diagnosed with an incurable spinal condition. This judgment allowed abortion for the farthest gestational in the country so far. Even after 24 weeks, there are women who have gone to the court of law because the medical boards have not given them the permission and have ultimately aborted the fetus, primarily because one, there have been abnormalities for the child. On the other side, it could have threatened their own life as well. So what we have is that these boards, even if they are not accepting, the medical practitioners are not accepting, in such a case, they have a window of opportunity to appear before the court of law as well. What are the criticisms with respect to this law? According to a 2018 study in the Lancet, 15.6 million abortions were accessed every year in India as of 2015. The MTP Act recognizes abortion to be performed only by the doctors with specialization in gynecology or obstetrics. However, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's 2019 and 20 report on rural health statistics indicates that there is 70% shortage of obstetrician gynecologists in rural India. On one side, the government expects that this operation or the abortion has to be performed only by the gynecologists and the obstetricians, but in this particular case, in the rural area, what we have is limited number of doctors. As the law does not permit abortion at will, critics say it pushes women to access illicit abortions under unsafe conditions. In fact, statistics put the annual number of unsafe and illegal abortions performed in India at 8 lakh, many of them resulting in maternal mortality as well. So what are the other issues with respect to the act? By giving medical professionals too much of a discretion, the law often allows all these doctors to deny the request. That is why they are heading to the judiciary. The reliance on the medical boards is also another sticking point in the 2021 amendment. By adopting a narrow definition of the physical health in large number of cases, what we ignore is the socio-economic implications of the childbirth, placing women under intense physical, mental and social stress. We are not identifying what a woman will go through after the resultant of the pregnancy. Instead, we are only catering to the physical health. We are not looking at the post-pregnancy complications. Will she be able to take care of the baby? Does she have the economic strength to take care of the baby? All this is not being considered under the 2021 amendment. The act also contradicts the Supreme Court judgment as well, where the Supreme Court had given autonomy to a woman about her body, privacy, and also live-in relationship. We did look at the Puttaswamy judgment. It said that whether to continue the pregnancy or not will have to be decided by the woman. But this 2021 amendment does not also look into that aspect, are some of the criticisms with respect to this legislation. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says making sense of New Delhi's Taliban rapprochement. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. India had recently sent a multi-member team of senior diplomats to Afghanistan. The minute they went and spoke to Taliban, it was also said that the Ministry of External Affairs was very cautious. What was this talk all about? The talk had a very limited dimension. It was about engaging with Taliban so that they could assist the people during the troubled times. They could assist and continue with the relationship with the people of Afghanistan, because we have had the historical and civilizational ties with Afghanistan. So this meeting with Taliban by the senior diplomats is basically should be viewed with a limited context and should not be read too much into this visit, said the Ministry of External Affairs. So what are we going to discuss in this article? We will try and understand whether this meeting with Taliban by the senior diplomats, is it correct, and why did India initiate such a step? And we will also look at arguments which say that India should not have had its talks with Taliban and in the near future should not also speak to Taliban. So we will look at arguments on both the sides of the issue. First up, we have to understand what has been the India's perception about Taliban. Back in the year 1996, what Taliban was able to do is come to power in Afghanistan. They were able to fight the forces that was existing in Afghanistan back then, and after a considerable period of time, they were able to regain power, and from 1996 up until 2001, it was Taliban which had the power in Afghanistan. India was under an apprehension. What did India feel? If Taliban continues to stay in Afghanistan, they will also start speaking about Kashmir issue, and when they speak about Kashmir issue, what we will have is the Kashmir insurgency, and ultimately what India felt was that we would have trouble because of Taliban's presence in Afghanistan, and indirectly it also started supporting Northern Alliance with a lot of money and weapons during 1996. Why? Because India felt if Taliban is in position in Afghanistan, its spillover effects can be felt in Kashmir, and as a result India will have troubles in Kashmir. So it started supporting the Northern Alliance with all the money and the weapons. And during the 1999 hijacking of the IC-814, when the Pakistani hijackers took the plane to Kandahar, the then ruling Taliban acted as a support arm of the hijackers. India's perception about Taliban also came right with this particular hijacking, because Taliban indirectly supported this hijacking. Second, in 2008, the CIA traced the bombing of the Indian embassy at Kabul to the Haqqani group, part of the Taliban and deeply embedded with Pakistani security establishment. It is also said that the bombing was reported to have been carried out at the orders of the ISI of the Pakistan. So what India felt was, if there is Taliban in Afghanistan which is taking care of the governance in Afghanistan, this could indirectly hurt India, and it will also be a security disaster for India as well. However, in this particular situation, India has decided to send its diplomats. These diplomats have spoken to the Taliban. Why did the diplomats go? In spite of India not wanting Taliban in Afghanistan in the first place, wanting Taliban to be removed from Afghanistan in the second place, identifying Taliban as a terrorist organization in Afghanistan in the third place. In fact, even when United States of America was withdrawing from Afghanistan, it did not support the Taliban rule. But why is Indian diplomats sent to Afghanistan? And why are they speaking to Taliban is what we have to understand. India basically believes that India is a regional power. So because India is a regional power, you have the presence of Russia in Afghanistan, you have the presence of China in Afghanistan. So if India withdraws, if India does not speak to the one who's currently governing in Taliban, India will not have its presence in Afghanistan. And so this whole idea of regional power will not come into picture. So India wanted its presence, and which is why it is interacting with Taliban is the first major thought process. And once the Indian diplomats went to Afghanistan, they spoke to Taliban as well. During the discussions with the Indian delegation, the Taliban has also urged India to reopen its embassy in Kabul. Now the question is, why is India speaking to Taliban? What are the likely consequences? We will understand them one by one. Over the 2 decades, India has poured money into rebuilding of Afghanistan, which it sees as vital to its security and also as a link to Central Asia. Last week, we did discuss on our big news as well that there was a bomb blast that happened in Gurudwara. We did also speak about India's interest in Afghanistan. We did build the Salma Dam, we did build the parliament quarters as well, we have helped in development of infrastructure. India has put in a lot of money in order to cater to the advantages of Afghanistan. Despite all this, if India is moving out of it just because there is Taliban, all the Indian interests will be completely eliminated. Pakistan is already investing a lot of money with respect to the Taliban's way of operation. If India is not doing so, all the investments that we have made in the past will be ultimately neutralized with Pakistan's presence. As a result, India felt whether it is Taliban or the government, we have to keep engaging. Only when we are engaging in Afghanistan, we would know what was happening in Afghanistan, and only then we would be able to bridge the differences, which is why India is communicating with Taliban. The second reason being Afghanistan is a security centric concern, in particular the nexus of militancy, illicit drugs and proxy warfare. India is a primary target for this alliance. So in order to prevent that such alliance does not come together and harm India in the near future, which is why India allowed the senior diplomats to speak with Taliban. Then we have the Pakistani Taliban, which has spread terror in Pakistan since it came into existence in 2007. If we are speaking about Taliban, we have the Afghan Taliban, we also have the Pakistan Taliban as well. The Pakistan Taliban are not happy with the way that the government is working in Pakistan. So what have they done? They have created bloodshed in Pakistan. In fact, it is the Afghan Taliban which had to come in between, and they had to establish peace between the army and the military of Pakistan along with the Pakistan's Taliban. So what we have is Afghanistan's Taliban, which is acting as a bridge to establish ceasefire and peace between Pakistan's Taliban as well as the government forces. So India feels that we have to capitalize on this. There are other disagreements between Afghanistan and Pakistan. One is to do with the Durand line along the border areas, and at the same time we have the Taliban, which has not issued any statements whatsoever about the Kashmir issue after it has taken power in the year 2021. All this means that India has to interact with Taliban, and it should not leave any lacune in that particular area. Another reason advanced for India's change in policy is the Taliban in power are more divided than they were as a fighting force. When they were a fighting force, they had a lot of unity, and they wanted to make sure that the government that was operating back then in Afghanistan is removed and they come to power. And once they are in power, there are a lot of differences as well. So these differences can also be sorted out if there is the presence of India. Why? Because there are women right issues, there are human right issues. Women are not allowed to study in Afghanistan as of now. As a result, there is a lot of conflict and disagreements within the Taliban itself. So what India is trying to do is to understand what these nuances are and ultimately enter into this part and bridge the differences and also provide humanitarian assistance. One view is that Indian outreach to the Taliban will also help to reconnect with the Afghan people, a link that snapped after the Taliban takeover. So this ultimately means that because India always had good relationship with Afghanistan's people trust India over Pakistan in order to make sure that we have the continued interaction with all the people in this part of Afghanistan. India had to engage with Taliban. Added to it, we also wanted to take care of the humanitarian gesture. Added to it, India wanted to speak to the people directly, so an engagement with Taliban would at least give us an opportunity to convey the Indian support to the people and also voice our concerns to the Taliban as well. So, in order to make sure all this is taken care of, India is speaking to Taliban, and it is right are some of the arguments. There are other set of arguments as well which say that whatever India has done in the present situation is not right. India should not have interacted with the Taliban. What are these arguments? An Indian first policy seems to drive Delhi's Taliban rapprochement. If so, it will destroy a central pillar of India's foreign and security policy, the dismantling of the region's terrorist infrastructure. When we speak about Taliban, India has always opposed Taliban from 1996 up until 2001, and even after the withdrawal of United States of America. It has identified Taliban as a terrorist organization, and India has always said that we have to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure that exists in Afghanistan. So in the past, what we have said is Taliban as a terrorist organization. Now, by speaking to this organization which India had abhorred in the past, are we going to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure, or are we going to support it, is the first major concern. Many Afghans also look up to India as an example of fellow developing nation that overcame the many challenges of building and sustaining a functioning democratic polity. This basically means that the people of Afghanistan trust India. They basically believe that India is a sincere friend of Afghanistan, and if India is supporting this organization which India had not supported in the past, we are indirectly supporting the activities of Taliban. The Taliban has excluded all non-Taliban Pashtuns from public space, as is shown by the house detention of former President Hamid Karzai. There are also systemic violations of human rights of the non-Pashtun communities which amount to crime against humanity, ethnic cleansing which borders on genocide. What is happening in Afghanistan now? We have the Pashtuns who are represented by the Taliban, and then you also have the non-Pashtuns as well. The non-Pashtuns are not part of the government. They do not have any positions in the Taliban, and these people, the Taliban, are also ethnically cleansing the non-Pashtuns as well. So if we go ahead and speak to Taliban, we are also supporting the actions of Taliban. So all these human right violations are happening. So why should India speak to Taliban is another major concern. So all of these actions mean that India should not be speaking to Taliban, are another set of arguments. But why is Taliban engaging with India? When we speak about why India is engaging with Taliban, we did say that India wanted to continue with the trade. India wanted to have its presence felt in Afghanistan. India wanted to also have humanitarian gestures as well. Similarly, what Taliban also wants is recognition. It wants countries to recognize it, that it is the right person, it is the right government, it is the right government running a country. So it is wanting for this recognition, and if India recognizes Taliban, many other countries will recognize, which is why Taliban is also engaging with India. So when senior diplomats from India went to speak to Taliban, they also reciprocated back because they wanted international recognition. Added to it, they also wanted to continue the trade with India as well. They also wanted humanitarian assistance as well. Recently, we did have the earthquake in Afghanistan. Large number of people passed away because of the earthquake, and India was one of the countries which provided humanitarian assistance to the people in Afghanistan. So Taliban feels if there is a country which will further the humanitarian assistance, it has to be India. So even they want India to interact with them, and which is why Taliban is engaging with India. What should be the way forward? As of now, we know for the fact that India is engaging with Taliban. So as much as it is engaging with Taliban, it should also speak to the opposition forces who are present in Afghanistan. They should not be isolated. India should not leave them out. They should be constantly keep speaking to these opposition on a parallel track, and it should continue the relationship with other section of the people who are present in Afghanistan. Added to it, Afghanistan also needs the UN mandate as well. So going forward, the UN led political transition process will have to be initiated, and India should lend its support to such endeavors in the near future. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says how Hanoi and New Delhi are fortifying defense ties. The article here is speaking about the relationship between India and Vietnam. We recently had the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh ji who made a 3-day visit to Vietnam. The visit was more about defense cooperation between the countries. They wanted to explore new initiatives to further enhance and strengthen the defense arrangement. If you look into what has happened between India and Vietnam in the past, Vietnam shares a comprehensive strategic partnership with India. This was signed back in the year 2016. Vietnam is an important partner in India's Act East Asia policy and Indo-Pacific policy as well. Bilateral defense engagements have been increasing over a period of time, and we have engaged with wide-ranging contacts, included number of defense dialogues, military to military exchanges, high-level visits have taken place. Then we have training programs between India and Vietnam, and there is cooperation in the UN peacekeeping, ship visits, and bilateral exercises as well. So remember, defense partnership between India and Vietnam has been growing steadily over the years. The defense protocol was signed in 2000, and currently India-Vietnam defense relationship includes extensive Navy to Navy cooperation spanning the exchange of intelligence, production and logistical support for Vietnam's defense agreements, development of naval facilities such as Nang Tarang, as well as the supply of warships and cruise missiles to the Vietnam by India. So basically, we have the Indian Defense Minister who made the visit to Vietnam for signing number of agreements between the countries. What are some of the agreements? The joint vision statement on India-Vietnam defense partnership towards 2030 was signed during the visit. This joint vision statement is basically aimed at boosting the scope and scale of the existing defense cooperation. The countries wanted to enhance on the existing relationship and want to further increase the number of defense engagements. The two countries also signed a memorandum of understanding on the mutual logistic support. So this happens to be the first such agreement signed between India and Vietnam. So what is this mutual logistic support? This basically means it is an administrative arrangement where India and Vietnam would be able to access military facilities for the exchange of fuel. This happens to be a significant one where Indian warship and military planes would be able to refuel and seek supplies at the Vietnam bases, which is what is called as mutual logistic support. What have been the other significant aspects when we come to the maritime domain for India and Vietnam? The maritime domain in particular has occupied a central focus to the following reasons. A substantial volume of maritime trade passes through the sea lanes of communication in the Indo-Pacific region, and the region also holds promise of large energy reserves as well. China factor is an add-on for both India and Vietnam. China claims sovereignty over the entire South China Sea. This region also has a huge amount of hydrocarbons as well. However, many Asian countries like Vietnam, Philippines are not happy with the aggression of China. So the enhanced geostrategic prominence of China and its increasingly assertive behavior in the region has resulted in an increase in emphasis on cooperative mechanisms and framework across the region. India has not backed down from continuing ONGC's Videsh Limited oil exploration project in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone despite the China's protest as well. So India and Vietnam have been developing strong bonds when it comes to the South China Sea issue as well. What are the convergent areas of India and Vietnam? Both Vietnam and India find convergence in their approaches to the Indo-Pacific region. India's Act East policy, Indo-Pacific policy, and the maritime multilateralism and security outreach across Indo-Pacific make Vietnam a natural partner for India. Both countries support the freedom of navigation and uphold sovereign maritime territorial rights as enshrined under the international maritime law. So basically, when we speak about India's relationship with Vietnam, we have number of projects that we have taken care of. We have agreements as well. All these agreements should be further enhanced. Top priority should be given to Vietnam, and all the existing projects should be completed as soon as possible. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. Discuss the conditions under which Indian women can safely terminate pregnancies. Next question. India's move to send a multi-member team of senior diplomats to Afghanistan to interact with the Taliban is a step in the right direction. Do you agree? Justify. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.